What's the worst coworker you've ever worked with? This guy named Daniel I used to work with at McDonald's in high school. He let everyone know he worked out and enjoyed being on the football team. He had this thing about taking 5 hits a day. He would walk by on his way back from the toilet, chest out, shoulders back, and triumphantly announce that's it number 3, ducking Daniel. This is about 15 years ago, but the office I worked in instituted a scent-free policy. One woman, who was already insufferable, was so offended by it that she snuck in her perfume collection. She'd walk down the halls and spray perfume into empty offices or cubicles when no one was looking or before everyone arrived in the morning. This went on for well over a month or 2 and we had no idea who was responsible. My co-workers and I started referring to this mysterious person as the Chanel Bandit. She was finally caught on camera in the act. She left for 3 weeks vacation and was unaware that we had installed cameras after a break-in. Some of us already suspected her, as the Chanel Bandit mysteriously stopped spraying while she was away. She quit right after she was caught. None of us were sad to see that cedar-scented psycho leave. I had a manager once who dumped trash on my desk my 3rd day there. She said it was to remind me that taking out the trash was part of my job description. It wasn't. I was a research assistant at a mortgage firm. Hired a cook on a good recommendation. He was just fine the first 2 weeks. Then I noticed food going missing. Then supplies started going missing. Then a customer told me that he had been adding auto 30% tips his food purchases. When I looked at the books, I saw that he had been adding 30% tips to all the credit card sales, and the cash rings were off from what should have been sold. I fired him that day. The next day he came in and apologized. Said he was on drugs and was going to rehab. I wished him well. Then next day he tried to break in after close and was caught. Idiot. My worst co-worker was one I worked with when I was a cashier at Walmart. She approached me and asked me to cash out her paycheck. I was still new at the job and never got training on how to do that function. She was sympathetic, so she walked me through how to do it. Transaction over and done. I go on about my day. I get called back a couple of days later by my managers and they circled me in an office and accused me of stealing. After tears, videotapes, and telling them what happened, they told me that apparently this co-worker of mine had stolen not only from me, but several other people that day as well. They just wanted to confirm I wasn't in on the deal. Duck Walmart. And duck that itch for almost getting me arrested. He just wouldn't work. Just wouldn't. This was in a research lab. He was a visiting researcher from another country, and he spent a lot of time asking tons of non-work related questions, to the point of disrupting others' work. In the course of a year, he designed one very basic experiment, and didn't actually do it, just designed it. He was above doing bench work apparently. He picked fights with everyone doing any experiment related to the one he was planning, because he didn't want to have to share credit for anyone. He wouldn't clean up after himself, wouldn't pick up things from the floor. He actually called me in from another room because he wouldn't take a stringless tea bag out of his mug. Also on a different occasion, because he knocked some things off a hanger on the back of the door and for whatever reason wouldn't pick them up. It was kind of like working with a child. He must have had servants where he lived. I don't know how, but he was there for his PhD. Boss fired him. He was one of 2 people in her 30+ year career that she'd ever fired. Edit. 90 messages. Whoa. In the interest of not reinforcing any stereotypes, I won't name the country. Such a person could come from many, and I dare say, any country honestly. I worked with a guy who'd interrupt any conversation to talk about anything as if he was the expert. And I don't use anything as a hyperbole. He truly had something to say about anything, including things he had never heard of or obviously didn't know much about. When the subject being discussed was something in the category of things he didn't know much about, he would slowly steer the conversation away from the original discussion to something he would like to talk about at the moment. It was both amazing and the most annoying thing I had ever had to deal with. He was like that Wikipedia game where you start with Star Wars and somehow end up on LGBTQ+ struggles. Not to mention the conversation was basically 98% of him just talking non-stop. Everybody else was way too polite and against conflict to say anything, including me, so most people just tried to stay away from him. but he'd follow people around. I eventually left, but I even remember having a nightmare where he was the best man at my wedding. He creeped the duck out of all the girls at work, and then it came out he had stalking and sexual assault charges pending outside work. Fired that day. When I was an intern, there was this old shrew who would call people into her office. My cube shared a thin wall. Gossip. Then call those people in to tell them what was said, etc. She would try to frame people for it she did wrong. She was so arrogant, and she refused to adapt to workforce modernization. Example, she refused to learn how to hyperlink in emails, documents, etc. A real ray of sunshine she was. I've worked a lot of factories, but one I worked at was mainly for felons. The pay you complete it and work you so hard it tears you body and mind up. I just graduated high school and it was my second factory, so I didn't know any better. One guy I work with, we nicknamed Big Matt since we already had another Matt. Well, Big Matt was a big fan of crystal and steroids, so the dude was absolutely jacked. But this 35-year still lived with his mom. He said it had to do with him being a kid and walking in her being raped, and ever since then he never wanted to leave her alone. At the time I thought, wow, that would explain the substance abuse. He just wants to be strong to protect her. Well, I was a ducking idiot. 2 months later, Big Matt and 2 co-workers didn't show up. So I asked the supervisor what happened, but he didn't know either. Next day one of the co-workers came in and told us that all 3 had been arrested because after buying an O of weed, Big Matt's mom called the cops on them. So before the cops showed up, Big Matt, a 6 foot some odd inch buff meth head, beat his mother within an inch of life for calling the cops on him. Next day I looked him up, and sure enough he was booked in a local prison. Suppose that has to be the worst co-worker out of all the ones I faced. Back when I worked at a restaurant I was friends with the bartender. Chill dude. Right up until they made him manager, and that small amount of power and increase in pressure made him so angry all the time. He screamed at me that I was it at my job because I didn't do a thing that I've never been asked to do before. He made me miss my last bus so I couldn't get home. It was pitch black outside and I cried on the bench outside the restaurant. Worst working day and worst co-worker. It took me a long time to get over that and realize I wasn't a it worker. He was just stressed and didn't know how to handle it, I suppose. My co-worker likes to initiate conversations, then does long pauses where you go to say something back. Then he cuts you off and keeps talking. He has entire conversations almost entirely by himself. He also likes to make changes to my paperwork before it's turned in. Ends up riddled with spelling mistakes while he tries to make the content look smarter. Fortunately it's all electronically stamped with who made revisions. He would walk in every day like it was his first day with no memory of anything we showed him the previous day. He was only focused for the first 30 minutes, then the rest of the time would be on his phone and try to work with one hand, which is bad because I work in a restaurant. Can't cook with one hand, but that didn't stop him from trying. Then one day he just stopped showing up for like a week, then was confused when he came back and was fired. Edit. I'm not sure if he had memory issues or anything like that. At least he didn't tell us or the owner. He did however like to talk about how easy our job was because he'd had 4 other restaurant jobs before this one. He was only 19. But we didn't make him do anything complicated, but he would forget easy things like where we kept burger buns or where buttons were on the register. Also he always left trash laying around after he was done with the job. It would be me and my other co-workers who cleaned up after him, and his excuse was always that he didn't think it mattered because it was gonna get cleaned up eventually. He still comes in every once in a while to watch our TV. Sometimes with friends and sometimes by himself. He never buys anything, but he just does it quietly so no one bothers him. I worked at a grocery store and one of the scheduling ladies was a total C-bomb. When you work at a grocery store you expect to have shifts all over the place. That's part of the job, so I'm not complaining about that. Just about 2 years into working there I had an accident and broke my thumb hand. Not while at work unfortunately, lol, and needed surgery. I went to apply for employment insurance, EI, and they required a record of employment, RO. So I asked the woman in charge of that, the aforementioned scheduling lady, if she would mind sending that off so I could still pay rent while I was off work recovering. BTW, she told me she already had. So I go back to the EI offices and they told me they still had no row, so I go back to my old work and ask her a second time. This happens until I asked her to do it 4 times. This resulted in me having to borrow money from my parents for Christmas in order to pay my rent. He was a complete utter moron. He was incompetent in every way. But the icing on the cake was when he tried to put one of the pickup trucks into gear with the wiper stick and called me an idiot when I told him it was the wrong lever. Edit 1. Oh my god. I didn't expect this to garner so much attention. Edit 2. I see a lot of comments thinking it was a 3 on the tree manual. This truck was a OSI 98 Ram 1500. Automatic trans. Column shifter. I worked in a certain touring exhibition last summer. It's not Potter, for your information. And of 200 people who were applying for jobs, 20 of us got the job. We were all close-knit and had a love for the exhibit content, and being all genuinely interesting people made us a family. Bar one woman. She thought she was the world's biggest star for having a 3-second cameo on GOT, and sent harassing messages and calls to many of us. She sexually harassed a lovely guy on the shop team who had no interest, undermined the bosses constantly, talked back, was rude to customers. When she thought we talked about her behind her back, she got defensive and spiteful. We didn't. One day she got knocked back for good by the shop guy, and for some reason decided to take it out on me. Started slabbering about me around to every other coworker, but never to my face. She called me a white snake. Now, I am albino and my hair color got me seriously bullied in school along the vein of her insults. So her name calling was very hurtful. I had enough and took it to HR, and she was fired for her actions. I could go on, but she doesn't deserve any more thought. My old supervisor. She was that special brand of too nice. Laughing was her nervous tick, and oh boy it was constant. She was incapable of being assertive, which is not the best quality for someone whose job is telling other people what to do. The best she could do was be passive aggressively nice when she really needed something done, which just made everyone dislike her. Context. I work in a hospital as a nurse's aide, and my department focuses on transporting patients around the facility for tests and room changes. I work night shift, and this person started their shift at 6 AM. There was this lady I worked with that just had the nastiest attitude. Normally I can get along with most folks, but this person just brought the whole room down with negative vibes. Nothing was ever good and she always had bad shifts. One thing she did that upset a lot of people was take patients down for rays and leave them down there to return to our office. The big thing to remember here is that even the lengthiest rays take maybe 10 minutes at the very most, 2-5 minutes on average for the scans. Every morning we got rays to do, and I had to send her back down to return patients to their rooms after the x-ray technicians called right as she got back to our office. The instances of leaving patients were common, so I informed my boss several times in person and email. Apparently she had an attitude with every other department we worked with and never informed nurses that we were moving their patients. Big no-no when meds and vital signs need to be done. One day she had abandoned a patient in the ER waiting room when they were waiting for a ride home and told no one, so security had found a patient just sitting alone for 15-30 minutes without supervision. It took this and a year of recorded evidence for this person to finally get fired. When that happened, it's like a dark cloud lifted and a lot of people were relieved. Oh, and she tried to get various employees around the facility to sign a form to argue against her case. One person signed. One of my favorite things about being in the military was that your pre-military status did not matter. Everyone wears the same uniform and you'd never know if your favorite military leader came from privilege or squalor. The uniform, for all of its drawbacks, is an objectively effective unifier. It levels the playing field. Looking the same as everyone else challenged me to ensure that my work ethic and ideas created opportunities, not some predetermined status. I had a peer who was better than all of that. He didn't do the work unless it interested him. We didn't do interesting things, and constantly complained that our work was below him. On more than one occasion, he tried to pay for others to do his work for him. His entire point of being in the military was to prove to his father that he could earn something, and sought to accomplish that by claiming he'd already earned it. Duck that guy. His name was Dan. Dan was 37, working at a dead-end job as a lab specimen processor in a windowless room for 9 hours a day. He ate only Burger King, but without the lettuce because that's rabbit food. He drank literally a gallon of Mountain Dew a day, and was confused as to why people were horrified by that. "There's water in it," he would say. Apparently if he ate corn he would vomit and have to go to the hospital. He would tell me he firmly believed that man and dinosaur roamed the earth at the same time, along with many other theories that came from his gut. One day we got into a political argument before the 2016 election where he said if Bernie Sanders is elected president, there will be a civil war, and I will not hesitate to kill you and your family. Dan was fired. I got out of there as soon as I could. Don't be like Dan. Worked with a girl who would sometimes just lay on the floor and play on her phone. She would routinely flip out about something her boyfriend did and just start screaming curse words, sometimes in front of customers. She was eventually fired for smoking weed while on the clock. At my first job, vet assistant at a small animal clinic, there was this middle-aged woman. She primarily worked as the receptionist, who was constantly snarky and rude towards me and my work. After sharing with another co-worker that I was planning to go to school to become a vet, she, the receptionist, laughed at me and said I don't think I could see you as a vet. I was only 16 years old. Mind you, I had big dreams and goals, and I was taking solid steps towards achieving them. I remember standing there, taken aback, and honestly holding back tears or any indication that I was upset. I was accepted to vet school at age 18. And I am still in school actively pursuing that dream. Guess I'm gonna prove her wrong. Edit. To clarify, I was accepted into an early entry program for vet school. That is how I was accepted at 18. I am in pre-vet undergrad currently, but I have been pre-accepted to vet school with a guaranteed seat waiting for me in my school's CVM after I finish my prereqs. No more application required. Edit 2. Your kind comments really mean a lot to me. Thank you all. I'm working hard and following my goals and dreams. Not for her, for me, and, most importantly, for all of the animals I will hopefully have the opportunity to help one day. I worked in childcare, and they had hired a new assistant trainee teacher for my room. Each room has 2 teachers. She just constantly argued about the dumbest shit, and always tried to argue with me about both company and state childcare policies because that's dumb. Also was late every day her first week there. It all just started adding up until I was changing diapers and she was holding a 2-year-old child on her lap. I see a child biting another child and say you need to go help them as I have a child in the middle of a very explosive poopy diaper change up on the changing table and can't leave him there obviously. She doesn't get up. I repeat it, and she says well I have this kid on my lap so I say take him off your lap. She responds he's strong like this grown-ass adult is unable to move a 2-year-old off her lap because of some weird super strength. Then the child bites the other child again and at that point I'm mad and tell her to get up and help them now. She then proceeds to say so what? I have to watch these 4 kids while you just have one up on the table? Like I'm somehow supposed to have multiple children on the table at once to make her job of sitting on the floor making sure kids don't get bit twice in a row easier. And our ratios were 4:1 anyways. I finished my diaper change, stuck my head out the door to my supervisor and told her get this lady out of my room and they did after and wrote her up after reviewing the footage of the incident. She was fired for no call no showing the next week. I've worked with a lot of idiots in childcare but she was so witty in such a short amount of time. I worked with this guy that tries to convert people to his religion every day, it's super annoying. Fast food. 3rd shift. The only other employee stayed in the bathroom doing blow. It's my time to shine. Sorry it's long. About 2 years ago I started work as a receptionist in an audiology clinic. So we do hearing aids and hearing tests. The only thing I knew about hearing aids before I took this job was that my grandpa had one. 8 months after I started, so at this point I have 8 months of experience with anything related to hearing. They hired a new provider, who I would later discover knew nothing about anything. Not hearing aids, not basic you should know this if you've had a job ever, not how to handle talking to bosses, patients, people over the phone, etc. Example, we had one patient who left her hearing aids with us to be fixed. She would call every once in a while to check on them, and I would say I'll ask the provider to call you and update you, which I did. 4 months later the same patient calls and I discover the provider had been ignoring me every time I told her to call the patient, and she just straight up didn't call her ever. Another example, she could never, ever remember to clock in and out, ever. It was a daily struggle with her. She would have to send in time card adjustments like every day and then complain to me when our boss was annoyed. She didn't know to fill out repair forms, so every time we had to send something out, I would have to double check and make sure everything was filled out correctly and legibly again. She is the provider who is credentialed in this field, and I'm the receptionist who has 8 months experience with hearing aids. She wouldn't do chart notes for weeks. Literally, she would have patient charts stacked in the corner of her office for days, forget to make chart notes, put in the incorrect dates, spell the patient's name wrong. So I would have to double check every chart before putting it back on the shelves. If she didn't know what to do with a patient, which was common, she would just do nothing. So I would have to pick up all of that slack, deal with the patients, take their complaints, talk to manufacturers over the phone. There were even times where I had to recommend hearing aids to patients because she just wouldn't. She would constantly forget to have patients sign paperwork. I would put a post-it on the chart patient must sign. I would tell her beforehand, and yet she would still let them leave without signing purchase agreements and medical waivers. She could not keep track of the time. She would be going 10-30 minutes over appointment times and I would have to deal with the pissed off patient. I would tell her hey time warning and she'd say okay and then ignore me. She would keep elderly patients in for her new patient appointments for like 2 or more hours, usually an hour and a half appointment. Sometimes patients would have to tell her they needed to leave because they were tired or their feet hurt. These people are in their 80s. And the best, everything that went wrong was my fault. She would blame me for her poor job performance, her inability to retain patients and sell hearing aids, everything. After 6 months of this I finally spoke up. I hadn't said anything up to this point because she was a really nice person apart from work and I felt bad for her. But everyone has their limits. And also our company was starting to zero in on her because she wasn't making them any money. She was put on daily Zoom meetings with our boss and trainers. When this happened they finally realized why she was making almost zero money. She was super incompetent obvs. They fired her. They told her they were shutting down the clinic altogether. But instead they hired a new provider with loads more education, experience. Someone who is confident and young and knows how an iPhone works. The only thing I got from this experience was a 30-cent raise at the end of the year and a major increases in my anxiety med dosage. Also I guess I learned a lot about my job lol. Also the new provider and I are BFFs so my job is much more enjoyable. Not necessarily a co-worker but my old supervisor literally told me not to think, even if it's wrong, that I do things her way, and not to ask questions because I should already know what to do. I had just gotten the position. I worked with a guy that regularly googled everyone we worked with. He knew information about the apartment we had just sold and told everyone at our department meeting how much we sold for. The HR manager at my last job had zero training, education or experience in HR. She was argumentative, passive-aggressive and incompetent. Toward the end she asked me, why are you being resistant and you're not being a team player? When I was advocating for client safety, I was the second person in less than a year to leave and hire an attorney. The CEO's girlfriend was a devout vegan who would patrol the office around lunch to make sure that anyone who was eating meat promised not to use the sponge in the kitchen to wash anything that meat had touched. She did this in yoga pants and heels. But because her personality sucked, she wasn't remotely attractive. For April Fool's Day, I rinsed out a carton of chicken broth and filled it with mango juice, and made a point of pouring myself a glass and drinking it in front of her. She was disgusted, so it was twice as delicious. She is both the financial manager and the HR person. So every problem that anyone had at the company became pillow talk between her and her fiancé registered signee. And he would sprinkle in the things she told him at meetings as if the problems were supposed to be common knowledge. This pair was a piece of work. He had been overheard saying I wouldn't care if I didn't hear music again in my life. Who says that? Sociopaths. That's who. I was eventually fired. and the official reason was that I had photoshopped grotesque images of several people in the office. What she failed to mention to the Department of Labor rep was that I had done it on my own time, on my own computer, and each co-worker had requested I do them next after I initially just did it to myself. My own photo just had my eyes moved farther apart so I looked abnormal, but not outside of the realm of possibility. For other co-workers, I flipped their faces upside down, made their eyes too big, removed their noses, facial hair, or covered their mouths up with beards. During my Department of Labor chat to work out my unemployment, the agent asked me to email her the photos, and it made her audibly laugh. Being fired was worth it just for that. Anyone who has ever talked it behind my back while acting like my best friend, I 100% keep my distance from co-workers now. I worked with a guy who couldn't learn new skills. When he started he had to learn new programs and processes. Just like anyone would at almost any job. He couldn't pick up on it. Whether it was where to click on a software to get a certain result or how to fill out a report. Everyone on my team took turns showing him the ropes and it never sunk in. I remember being so frustrated because he could not figure out how to minimize a window. Top right corner. Click on the straight line. It took like 3-4 seconds for him to drag the mouse to the corner and then he'd hover around it but never on it. Super nice guy, but impossible to work and collaborate with on projects because so much time was wasted. 3-person department. Myself, an awesome dude and this terrible new co-worker. She was fresh out of college and believed that she was smarter than myself and our other team member because of that. She totally discounted anyone's opinions except her own and one manager that let her do whatever she wanted. She was the worst one-upper than I'd ever met. Even for stupid things, like going to a coffee stand. She'd chime in and say how her friends work at a coffee stand and they know her order by heart. Just stupid stuff. She thought she was adorable and charming but was incredibly grating and worthless. She constantly messed up on her job but if you tried to help or give any constructive feedback, she'd cry and go to her wet nurse. Aka the one manager that liked her. She lasted almost 4 years, which blew my mind. She was furloughed at the beginning of Corona, but will not be returning as her position is being taken by the owner's daughter. The company split about 2 years ago. I went to the new company and she and awesome dude stayed at the old one. I'm pretty cool about people all have their role to play. But one time we had a secretary that would microwave eggs and canned tuna every morning in a bowl. Now, I am not a violent person, but the smell generated from microwaved eggs and canned tuna is downright repulsive by anyone's standards. In the interview, something along the lines of "You're quite young. How do we know you'll be responsible enough to work with our team?" As if she was running an Olympic team and not a fast food joint. I know this is not an unusual question but her attitude spoke more than her words. Well, I was technically homeless, a young teenager at the time, staying in a shelter. I explained this being my motivation. I needed a day program, wanted a permanent place to live, and someday be comfortable enough financially to go back to school. Before I was homeless, I had amazing grades in school, volunteered with the Red Cross and a few other organizations, babysat for many families, had my babysitting course and first aid training, so it wasn't as if I had a terrible resume. But she talked down to me as if I should be kissing the ground she walked on, just because she provided me with an interview. Well, a week or 2 went by and I didn't hear back from them, so I assumed I didn't get the job. 3rd week I get the call and was told to come in later that week for training. Once again, such attitude. She didn't ask. She didn't offer. She demanded I be there. Well, I had gotten another job, but was more than willing to work 2 jobs to achieve my goals. My very first day, on my very first shift, I was given the most basic instructions. Read the employee handbook, then come get her. It took me no time. She was adamant I was illiterate because I was so quick, so I must not have read it. She was pointing to random words getting me to read them. It was annoying, but goals, homeless and all. She walked me over to a till, put me in a headset, and told the other woman at the till to make me do all the work. I tried my best, but zero training on anything, no guidance. On a weekday lunch rush in an industrial area, it went bad. Fast, bid order. She grabbed my arm and dragged me into the office. She berated me for a solid 10 minutes on how I was just some pathetic, disgusting homeless scum with no manners. No wonder no one wanted me. No wonder I was homeless. How pathetic. Honestly, it makes me cry thinking about how cruel and harsh she was. She had no idea I was homeless because my parents were beating me, starving me, neglecting me. No, she just knew I was this young homeless piece of it. I took it, not a ducking tear in front of her. I knew if I cried, well, let's just say had I had a therapist, then I would have been diagnosed with battered women syndrome much sooner. I knew not to cry. Finally she was done. I took off the headset, went to the staff room to change, grabbed my stuff and left. No one said a word to me. I just left. Once in the parking lot, just far enough away to be in the same lot, but in front of another business. I fell to my knees and began crying. Rage crying. Sobbing. Crocodile tears. Full on breakdown. You know the kind. It feels like you won't ever stop crying. Someone came up to me and put her arm around me. I just cried in her arms. When I was done, I finally saw who it was. It was the assistant manager from the exact place I just left. I was flustered and furious and embarrassed. She just looked at me and told me manager is rich. So much so she is actually being fired this week, and I will be promoted to her position. What she did was so wrong. If it's okay with you, I would still like to hire you. I think you would be a great asset. We had a brief discussion about the current manager, how the owners would hear about what she had done to me, and if I still wanted the job she would contact me later in the week to arrange a schedule for me. I went on that Saturday, met the owners before a staff meeting where they introduced the newly promoted manager, explained the previous manager had been let go, and introduced me to the team. I was offered the job, with a slight wage increase. I think minimum wage was around $2.25 HR and I was given $2.45 HR. I worked there for nearly 10 years. I got my high school diploma, went to college, literally became an adult there, and worked my way up the chain of command. Well, as high as I could, since the manager was so incredible. The turnover rate was crazy low. Literally, my best and worst bosses of all time at that place. Being almost 25-30 years ago. Obviously no FB and I haven't kept in touch with much of the crew, but some days I think back on that place, the staff, the customers, the friends, and hope they are all well. Sorry for the long story.